and welcome back, guys. Back again with a guest episode. I'm here with my co-host Ryan George, and we have Mr. What's the best way to introduce you? Just Nino?
Nino.
Just Nino. Just Nino
That's
is in the
it.
building, yo. Just Nino's in the building. I think where we're gonna pick it up started off is how we connected.
Yeah.
Because I really, as I was saying, I really liked that conversation. So I was on Instagram, obviously mindlessly scrolling, came across a clip with you and Miss Alana Kit. Alana Kit. And you guys were basically talking about, spirituality, but also about the money side of it, which is it's a difficult conversation to have. And it just resonated with me because just, having been in the industry now, seeing a lot of people trying to figure out ways to monetize spiritual practices. And you guys were having an interesting conversation around, how do we go about that and how are we more mindful of where all these practices came from? And, coming from it, not like you've discovered something, but more so that you're, I don't know how to phrase it. More so that you're, I don't know.
Sharing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sharing the knowledge or, making it accessible to people who otherwise would not have seen that.
Yeah. I think why I'm passionate about that conversation is I think that opportunistic capitalism has unfortunately degraded the truth and the authenticity in those practices, because what you have is now people who are excited about a vacuum that they can make, a monetary vacuum where they can make profit. And they, in that excitement, which I understand because that's the nature of opportunistic capitalism, like we saw even within the COVID pandemic where people suddenly buy thousands of masks because they know they can resell them. It's opportunistic, but it's often done out of integrity without any care or attention to the actual practices and the traditions from which they arise. I see a lot of people whom they talk about things that, quite frankly, they've spent a year of their lives engaged with them, and then suddenly now they're teaching or they find themselves in positions of authority within it. And I wouldn't mind it so much if they were honest about where they were, but the way that they market themselves and sell the practices, and then the way they price these practices are just irredeemably disgusting for me. In my ethics of how I hold spiritual practices, seeing them being degraded to some kind of like stress management tool to help make you more productive is just so antithetical to what these practices hopefully would do, which is bring you into a cultivation of the present moment that helps strip you of the ego and shallow identity, freeing you and pulling you towards self-realization. And within self-realization, you would be letting go of a need to be productive, of the idea of attachment to possessions and money. But it's like they're doing it out of the worst, or out of the tendencies that are the very things that you're trying to let go of through these practices, which tells me you're not embodied. You're not actually practicing what you're preaching. You're preaching to make money and selling often to people who
don't know better.
Well, it's a get rich quick scheme. So just like you see people selling financial courses and things like, oh, I'm going to teach you how to make $1 million in a month. It's just people who are desperate and don't know, they're not literate in the space, financially literate, whatever. And they're like, well, maybe this guy can help me because I don't like where I'm at. So I'm going to do this quick fix to get the result I want the fastest. But that's, as we know, not how life works.
taking advantage.
Yeah. It's just taking advantage, and like, it's never a quick fix. It's never like, oh, I'm going to do this one thing and get rich. Everyone would be extremely wealthy if that was it.
Yeah.
Right.
If it's too good to be true.
Well, that's
usually not true.
Exactly.
Usually
So
true.
like when you say that, it resonates because you see that a lot promoted, especially on like platforms like TikTok and YouTube. Everyone has a voice now and everyone has a platform. And the amount of misguidance that occurs within that is just, it's outstanding.
I think that's actually been one of the greatest inspirations for me creatively is perhaps, yes, okay, one could argue, oh, I shouldn't let anything bug me. I should be super spiritual. But I'm like, no, things do bug me. And I'm happy that they do because I think that speaks to my own integrity. And then that's what fuels me. Like a lot of the content that I've been making recently is hopefully in calling out how these processes come about. Like you said, around this idea that somebody is selling you a quick fix to make $1 million. No, they're selling you on how they're going to make $1 million by you buying this program. And enough of you people are going to fall for kind of clever marketing tactics, but also shady. And then they'll make $1 million and then they'll have proven to themselves like, see, I do know how to make $1 million and thus I am qualified to teach this course. But it's like, no, man. You took advantage of people under the presupposition that you would make them rich. and then you made yourself rich. And,
Yeah.
and that stuff is just
Usually how it goes.
yep.
It's like sign up
Yeah.
for my course. I'm gonna teach you everything I know, while they're just pocketing the money, and it's a mediocre course at best.
At best.
That
Yeah.
requires way more knowledge and information than what they give you to actually get rich.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like people who sell you like, like the snake oils and all that stuff. It's like, take this all, like it's going to cure everything. This one thing, but it's going to cost you $1,000. Well,
Yeah.
Come on.
I think that's why that conversation resonated with me. Because also I saw that I felt just based on consuming your content and the conversation, the level of conversation that was being had, that there was some thought and work that had gone into formulating those opinions. So a lot of times I'll see people pop up and I'll be like, question mark, question mark. I don't know how much thought they've put in. I don't know how much of this is just, I read one book and now I'm basically a professional at summarizing that book, or I would listen to a few Huberman podcasts and I know how to regurgitate all the facts from the Huberman podcast. Whereas yours, I felt like, okay, this guy seems like he's actually done some work here. He's actually dug into these things and he's having these conversations to probably challenge your own opinions, right? So that that what you believe is actually truth, or as close as possible to truth as you can get. So I think that's why I was like, right away, I followed him and DM'd him. I was like, dude, love this conversation. Like this is a conversation that needs to be had more often. And I'm glad that you were having that conversation.
Yeah.
And with that being said, I kind of want you to give people a background on like what, because I know you've studied in school.
Who am I? What do I do?
who you are,
Exactly.
what you're doing. You were also just sharing like you just recently finished the breathwork certification.
Yeah.
So all that I think is important for people to know so that
Yeah.
they get that
give some
background.
context.
Yeah.
I'll give a kind of what I think is like the more fun or poetic idea, which is when I was a little kid, I really wanted to be a Jedi. And I was like, I loved the idea of it. I told my dad and he very quickly said, that's not real. Very quickly, he saw the heartbreak in my eyes, but he said, oh, you could be an actor. And from like the age of 4 or 5, suddenly I was entrenched in the idea that I'd like to explore the human condition, at least through acting. So I was a child actor and I was exploring that. I was always very curious and asking questions. As I got older, I did AP psychology in high school and I thought, okay, this is interesting. And again, I was very into exploring the human condition. I was reading philosophy, a lot of psychology, and even studying Buddhism at the time. And at 18, I had what very typically these days is called a spiritual awakening, aka I just finally got tired of my own shit and hated myself enough, and couple things happened that were catalysts to me going, you know what, maybe I don't know who I am properly. Maybe this world isn't exactly how I think it is. And maybe I need to be a little bit more open-minded. And I was in business school at the time, and I did 2 more years of business school until I kind of woke up and realized this doesn't set my heart on fire at all. So I decided to do psychology, and I ended up studying psychology with a minor in counseling. All the while I was meditating every day, studying Buddhist texts, and I was very much Buddhist in nature. I was doing like Buddhist meditations all the time, always listening to lectures from Buddhist professors and scholars. And that was my kind of entryway into all this. And it wasn't until I graduated university, but I never shared this because quite frankly, I thought spirituality was personal and not something that anyone gave a shit about.
Mhm.
And quite frankly, when I was 18, 8 years ago, and I was suddenly spiritual, nobody gave a shit and nobody wanted to hear it. Everybody was like, oh, he's like this hippy dippy weird kid. And I was like, fair enough. I'm going to keep this to myself and shut up.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I was 23 where a girl I was dating and I was making music and I was in the arts, kind of putting myself out there, with this girl who I was dating said, man, why don't you share the stuff you do every day? She's like, every day you're into the psychology and trying to improve yourself and doing wellness and meditation and breath work. And I thought, nobody cares, because I was just scared. The truth is, I thought that if I showed the depth of who I was, that suddenly I would be judged and I wouldn't be accepted because I had to be kind of a narrow idea of myself. But she was right. I started to share online, and really quickly I built an audience on TikTok, which kind of blew up. And again, honestly, I didn't know what I wanted to do because I was still drinking really heavily. And I felt that it would be out of integrity for me to really step into a role where I'm helping people if I still hadn't overcome my personal roadblock, which for me was like alcohol and the vices surrounding it. And then I sobered up, kind of moved into a coaching space because it felt like a natural development from psychology, having studied spiritual, thinking, or like the spiritual perspective of the mind, of which usually contends that we are not the shallow identification of thoughts and emotions, but we are a deeper awareness from which these things, the container in which these things arise. And that's always resonated with me. And now I've spent the better part of like 10 years exploring that in my own life. What does it mean to not be who you think you are? What does it mean to not be attached to your emotions? What does it mean to live presently, have integrities and values, all the while practicing a non-dualistic perspective that recognizing that all is one, there is no good and bad? How do you hold that nuance and embody that and not go crazy and psychotic? Well, it's a lot of practice, hard work, and discipline. And that brings me to today, where now I'm like, I have a breathwork certification. I coach clients one-on-one, where I kind of call myself a spiritual coach because, and inevitably, my spiritual values are integral to my coaching practice, because I always lean into the idea that who people tell me they are is not who they are, because if it's coming from the idea that they are their thoughts and emotions, that's a shallow perspective on who they are. The depth of their soul is much greater than that. And that's hopefully what I try to help people recognize, that, and I always call it, my tagline is I'm guiding you to your inner wisdom, because I don't believe that it's for people to come to me and then me act like I'm the fucking prophet and I have their answers. It's more like, I'm very certain that almost every human who's not mentally debilitated has the capacity to turn inwards and with hard work, discipline, and practice, become the guide of their own life and be the purveyor of their own wisdom. And that's kind of my whole shtick, is trying to empower individuals to think freely and gain their own wisdom. And I think I find myself in these podcasts and these conversations because I am in contrast or antithetical to this disempowering narrative that exists within our culture, that you should always just listen to someone else. There's someone in authority who knows better than you. And that was something, I guess, that became prominent in this big pandemic, where suddenly our autonomy and our sense of agency was externalized to people who, quite frankly, never should have been making those decisions for us. And so I find myself now engaged in this cultural conversation of, from, I guess, a spiritual perspective of, hey guys, you should always go to yourself within for the deepest answers. And I can work with you and help you do that and teach you the skills and the mechanisms and the practices so that you become empowered as an individual. But I will never be a fan or a part of a culture that suggests we defer our power to some centralized authority who does not have your best interests at heart. Well, that is my shtick.
Trust the experts, right?
Yeah.
But experts are wrong all the time.
Things are always changing, and experts are just basing their opinion on science that's shifting, right? New studies come out every single day.
And at the end of the day, it's their opinion. Yeah. It's their expert opinion. Yeah. But it's still an opinion.
100%.
Right. So
take me through some of these, because you're talking about a lot about discipline. Like, how does someone who's not in tune with themselves become in tune with themselves through discipline?
I think one of the biggest faults, let's say, when people start a disciplined life is they think they have to do it all at once, and they think they have to do all the things that they've been told they have to do. So suddenly you have this person who has no interest in meditation, no interest in running, no interest in waking up early.
Yeah.
And suddenly they're being forced to do things that are not aligned with any of their actual interests or values. It becomes something they're able to do for a week, and very quickly they're going to never do it again. And then they claim it didn't work or it wasn't positive.
Yeah.
As such, for people who are new to this disciplined life or, don't have the experience, I always go, start with asking yourself simple questions like, what do you value? And, I think for most of us, the answers are similar. We do value our health. We value this, we value that. But perhaps for somebody, the idea of going on a run is awful, but they love dancing. So I'd encourage them, okay, the structure, and again, scheduling is super important. Schedule 10 to 15 minutes a day to dance, and you're going to make sure before you leave your home, for instance, and this is something I learned from Atomic Habits by James Clear, is always set up your environment to facilitate your habits so that you're primed to do them. You don't want to think too much about discipline. If you're always having to think about what you have to do, most likely you're giving yourself time or resistance. So for instance, let's say with me, when I wake up in the morning, the first thing that I see when I open my door is my meditation pillow all set up and lined up perfectly for me to go sit and meditate. So I'm not thinking, what do I have to do when I wake up? It's my environment is telling me that. And I think it's these little tricks that I've learned along the way, that if you set up your environment to facilitate your habits, you set up habits initially that you actually are excited about doing, and you start small. I don't start with, I'm going to read 30 pages a day and meditate for an hour. You will not be able to do, maybe you, but most people will struggle trying to do these things, and it won't be effective and you'll turn yourself off. another great tip from that book is identify with your new habit. I know this sounds silly, but for instance, instead of being like, oh, I don't really meditate, but it's something I want to get into, start calling yourself a meditator. Literally start going, I'm a meditator. It's the same principle around alcoholism where like, if you go, I'm sober. I don't drink. You start telling yourself that.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to go to a restaurant because the first thing you'll say often to the waitress is, I'm sober. When they ask around, would you like something to drink? Because then suddenly you're almost closing that off. Or in a habit wise, you're going, I meditate. Oh yeah, that's something I do. That's who I am. It's a part of myself. And hopefully over time, all these things really help with discipline. Put them together.
No, for sure. That mind hack is the best. Identifying with what you want to be.
It really is.
Yeah, and setting that intention. Like I now am this person. Like we talked about this on the first episode. Like when I was like, I'm now a video producer. I didn't even know what that was, but that's how I started introducing myself to people when I still worked at Pure Later. Just because I bought a new camera and I'm like, yeah, this feels right. This is what I want to do. So this is what I'm gonna tell people.
But you have to do that.
But because I had to convince myself, because I was just doing it as a hobby for the longest time and I didn't believe it. As soon as I started believing it, I started getting opportunities. And then I was becoming the proof I needed because it's like, oh, people are actually willing to pay me to do this. I can do this now. Right? And because we're dumb. So like our brains will lie to us all day, every day, telling us we're not good enough. You can't do this because we don't have the proof. Because we need to see the proof. And it's just like, if you just like speak it and believe it and set that intention, then things will fall into place.
I believe it. 100%.
Right? You just gotta, that's why visualization is so powerful. And so many fighters and professional athletes will visualize themselves having the victory, having the outcome they want. Because if they run that enough times, they'll feel it in their body as if it's already done.
Did you see the Arnold documentary where he talks about that? Arnold Schwarzenegger, he talks about how literally every single thing that he ever accomplished, he said that he has an extreme power of visualization. He's been able to see himself do every single thing that he's ever done before it's happened. And I do, whether that's on a, let's say in the spiritual lens, it's like, yes, because now you're moving your direction into that alignment, whatever. In the psychological lens, like kind of what you're saying is, well, now you're able to create this psychological environment where now practicing these things becomes more manageable. And you also lower the amount of psychic conflict that arises with that, because I think most people's limitations are self-imposed. We just tell ourselves we can't do things.
100%. Yeah. And like Conor McGregor's a big example of that too. Like he was on welfare living in his parents' like attic and
with now, his girlfriend.
Yeah. Right. And then he went to being the most recognized, highest paid athlete in the world in 5 years. And he's like, even every championship he won, every belt, whatever, he's like, it just feels right because I already saw myself here. And he talks about the power of visualization all the time. He's like, I just see it.
What do you think are the things that are like, what do you think are the things that block people from reaching their potential more than anything? Like, where do people hit the roadblock? Because we're all born with like the ability to visualize and imagine anything, anytime, and to believe that we can do. As a kid, you can believe and you believe anything. You believe you could do anything. So how does that veil come over us?
The school system, bro. What are we talking about, bro? They basically put you in prison for 8 hours a day and force you to do things that aren't in correlation with how you naturally are.
That's okay. So I think
they beat the play out of you.
As adults, there's two things that
fucking
arise.
Crazy. You just said they beat the play out of you.
That's facts.
That's brilliantly said. Because if you were allowed to play, I believe that each individual child would be able to come to a place where they actually know who they are and what their unique talents are and when you know yourself, you can be inspired to call your highest self and move towards that. Now, what I see, unfortunately, is you see a culture that pushes people through a very narrow school system and also through a media lens. So what happens is you have individuals who all value the same kind of jobs. Everybody, for instance, nowadays wants to be an influencer. Whether or not that's actually what these people want to do, I would say it's not. I would argue that a lot of the jobs that all these people tell me their dreams are, I'd argue a good percentage of them, that's not that person's actual highest dream or potential. It's what they think they should value because that's what they've been programmed to think. And that's why, unfortunately, then actually me being like, let's say I at one point was like a hip hop artist and I really wanted to put out music and all that. And, you'd meet people in the similar spaces and you start having a conversation. Oh, why do you want to do this? And I would have like this deep, like, oh, I love expressing myself, the human condition. I need an outlet to transmute my pain and trauma. Like I need to be an artist. I need to do this stuff because it's who I am.
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh, I just thought it looked cool. And it's like, oh shit. That's what I think the big blockage is people don't know who they are, firstly. So a lot of what they're doing, whether that's living at night, working at a 9 to 5 or trying to be a rapper, it's not who they are. They think that's who they should be because the culture told them it. And then secondly, how can they then, let's say they do know who they are, how can they actually accept that when the culture has told them a very narrow possibility of what they ever could be, right? So it's that two blockages. It's people don't know who they are. And then when they kind of figure it out, the whole world says, you can't be that. You're not allowed to be that. Who the fuck said you're allowed to do many things that are creative and that you enjoy and you love? That's stupid. You're supposed to, suffering is integral to making money in our culture. It's equated. It's like, yeah, it's part of what we do. And that's what our parents told us, right?
Well, especially like, I mean, I'm sure Hassan can speak to this too, like having parents that are first generation immigrants.
Yes, but I'm an immigrant.
Oh,
Same, like,
you know.
it's like, get a safe job, go to school, get a safe job, and that's it. You want to do
Get a
art?
mortgage.
You can't pay bills with art. You can't pay bills with music. Because to them, especially my family, like they came from a communist country.
Oh, really?
There's
Cuba?
no
Romania.
Romania.
Oh.
There's no like
Crazy.
like there's no
crazy communism.
option to be creative or like explore anything. It's like you do what you're told, and that's it. Like, you know what I mean? Like it just doesn't make any sense. They to them that wasn't an option. So coming from that background and then coming here, even though like we had all the opportunities and all the options, they're still like, get a safe job, become a doctor, engineer, teacher, something that's going to be around forever, a nurse.
Yes.
Whatever it is, so you have a stable job. It doesn't matter if you like it or not. Just do that because then you don't have to have a hard life like we did. Even now when I tell my mom, like, I get paid to work with my camera, she's like, what do you mean? Like, who's paying you for that?
Right.
Do you have enough? Who's feeding you? Like, how do you eat? And I'm like, Mom, like, you don't understand. Like, I'm making more now than I ever did working a corporate job, and I make my own schedule. I have the freedom to do what I want. And she's like, I don't understand.
Yeah.
Like, but they just don't get it.
It's hard for them to put that lens on.
They don't get it.
Yeah.
They don't get it.
Well, how can you conceptualize that which you were never allowed to even think or explore, and you were actively punished for exploring that stuff?
So the reason I said like they beat the play out of you, my dad used to get beat for playing soccer
There you go.
as a kid because that's not allowed.
What,
You can't play. No.
in Romania.
Because they don't want competition.
I mean, his parents, they were just like, you don't do that.
Damn.
That's like not, but they were also extremely religious, but I don't know if there was some religious connotation to that, whatever, or if it was just like, you're going to get your clothes dirty or what. But like, if he played soccer, he would get beat.
Yeah.
Damn. So they
Like, he told me a story once that him and his cousin, they were climbing trees and he fell out of the tree and he was high up, told his parents, like where his sisters, whoever it was he was with, went to get his dad, whatever. And then he got beat because he was climbing the tree.
Yeah.
He was already injured and he still got beat because you shouldn't have been in the tree.
It's just probably like you don't want to ever have to go to the hospital or deal with any type of authority when
But
you're
like-
living in a communist country.
You know what I mean? It's like he learned his lesson.
Yeah.
He fell to the ground. Like, you know what I mean? He's already like, they had to come and get you for help.
Yeah.
And then you're punishing him for being a kid and playing and hanging out and just like, that's what kids do.
Yeah.
Think
You know
about
what I
that,
mean?
what that does to your psychology. It always makes me think of like the monkey experiment where, you know, after a while you can train monkeys in a group to, like, after a certain point, I forget, man, I'm probably misremembering this, but you create this environment and suddenly when any monkey tries to get out or like climb higher than a certain point, the other monkeys will like attack that monkey. And I think that that's kind of what you see on a social or cultural level where it's like, we are all so programmed because we got the play beat out of us. We got punished for thinking big that now when we see other people doing what you're doing, embracing what we're trying to do, like being these creative entrepreneurs, following your dreams, calling your highest self into reality, people can't help but want to pull you down because if they can't believe in their own potential, how the fuck are they going to believe in yours? And that's what I think it is, right? It's the most successful people I know, when they hear anyone with an idea, they go, yeah, why not? Because they go, why not?
Yeah.
Like, sure, if you put in the work, hard time, and you fail a bunch of times, I'm sure you could get there. It's only people who've never tried to fail that always doubt.
Mhm.
Right.
So I go that it's like a programmed response. It's like they've been conditioned to neglect their own potential, and now they're conditioned to neglect anybody else's.
That's a huge part of it.
It's sad.
Yeah.
It is very sad.
I always like to think, I like to think, well, I always like to tell myself I'm not special. I think that's a very important thing to tell yourself, is that you're not special. But that
I'm special.
not special in the sense like, I figured it out
I'm
kind of
piecing.
deal,
Yeah.
right? What is it that gets you to the point where you have these realizations? And I'm saying more so for you for me personally, it's always been a drive to be disciplined. Because like I've always looked up to like for me, I idealize like when I hear someone like, they follow a strict routine, like a Bruce Lee figure or a David Goggin figure, or even like Goku, bro. Like when I was growing up, it was like I was like looking up to Goku, because Goku's always training hard, right? So those were the things that always kind of like grounded me. I was like, I don't know what exactly I need to do, but I know that I need to be disciplined.
I would say, okay, so for you is the discipline aspect, but I would argue from what I just heard, not to psychoanalyze you here, but it's like,
go for it.
You as a kid were seeing great men in whether that's in animation or like real and going, well, I would like to be great. How did they do it? Well, through discipline. Okay, I'm not special. And they always say they're not special, but just through discipline, you can do it. I would argue it's the exact same thing. I think men, we have this within us. I would argue women probably do too. That when I was a kid, I would look at great men, great individuals who inspired me. And to be honest, it sounds again silly, but Jedi, that's these characters. And I thought, well, what makes them a Jedi? Well, they're very disciplined. They train every day. They have these meditative practices. There's these spiritual warriors who uphold a moral code. They have a very disciplined moral code around them. And again, as I got older, obviously that idea like developed. I didn't get stuck on, I literally want to be a Jedi. But I was 10 years old, literally asking my dad, like I was having these fucking deep philosophical thoughts at 10 years old, being like, Dad, why are we Catholic? And he, well, because of this, that. And I go, okay, but can't I just believe in the Force? And he was like, what? That's ridiculous. I go, yeah. And he goes, and I go, no, but think about it. I was like, what's the difference? It's like the idea that there's there's an energy that's everywhere. That's like what they say about God, that he's everywhere. And like, there's good stuff and bad stuff. That's like the light side and the dark side. And you guys say that if you believe in God, it helps your life. Well, that's the idea. If you believe in the Force and you learn to harness it, it gives you like powers. And my dad's like, no. Because the difference is what one is from a random guy who just made it up. And I was like, and the other's from a random man who made it up. And again, it was like, I was just trying from a very young age to understand what is the thing that makes one great? Do you have to believe in a certain thing? Do you have to have aligned practices? So I was always very curious about that. As I got older, you fuck up all the time. And through my mistakes, I learned that like you were kind of right. You had your gut instinct was right. You have to have like a very strict discipline. You have to have a vision. You have to have like a visualization. You have to be able to see something. And then after a certain point, I think for me, and then can you learn to let go of that, have faith in God and surrender to the fact that you'll never know better than the ultimate creator. And in that humility, you stop trying to control. And the irony is when you stop trying to control, suddenly you have more control and you start learning about the paradoxes of the universe. And then you become able to flow and you start realizing discipline means freedom. Surrender means control. That the more you live through what I call the paradoxical laws of the universe, the more in harmony you are. The less attached I am to my possessions, the more they easily flow to me. The less attached I am to money, the more I can get from it. The less I'm trying to take from people and the more I focus on giving them value, the more value I return it. It's just the way it works. And it's like, I've just started to figure it out.
Isn't it though? Like,
it's just the way it works.
And like basically every religion is around this aspect of being a decent human being. It's not that complicated.
It's not that deep, bro.
It's not that complicated. The more you give, the more you get. And it's just, that's just how it works. And I don't know why that's how it works. It's just how it works.
Yeah.
And like you said, the control around money and things like that. Like when you have a tight grip on it and you're stingy and you're always just mine. You're like a squirrel just hoarding nuts. And they're like, they're mine. I need to keep these for like a rainy day or whatever. It's like, that's just stored energy. You're just storing that energy and you're putting that out there like, don't give me any more because like I'm just gonna hoard it. I'm not gonna do anything with it. I'm not gonna use it to benefit anyone, myself, anyone else.
Better the world.
Right. I'm just gonna hold it. And it's like, well, what are you doing with that? It's just stored energy.
I think the universe celebrates energy and motion. Because the earth or this universe is in a constant dynamic flow, it's like the more that you can flow with it and move with it in all aspects and like know where resistance is and open yourself up so that you can allow those resistance to flow through you. That's when it's like this elevated state increases. And I tell people, and then, okay, I'll say all that. And I do see a lot of women will go, yes, a lot of women, because in my experience with my life, women tend to, and like this is like the energy thing, be more flowy and the less disciplined ordered type. Male is the order and discipline. Women is the creative, the flow, the expression. As such, often I hear from that side, the pushback is, but you just said you have to flow. And now you're talking about discipline and structure. I feel like for me, I get way more done if I just do whatever I want. And I go, yeah, that's a great way to live through your impulses and to not recognize one of the essential truths of spirituality or this deepness, which is you are an expression of the infinite divine. You are a unique expression of God. As such, you creating discipline is God acting through you. Not doing whatever you want or as it arises is to neglect the reality that impulses are real and impulses aren't you. Impulses are things from the environment, triggers, and that I would say is not moving in flow with God. That's being a slave to your surroundings. Whereas creating discipline through intention is allowing God or the flow to act through you in a healthier way, I guess.
So a lot of your spiritual practices, where would you say they're coming from?
I come
or like what? Like I think it's an open question. Spirituality can be practiced in any kind of way, but what is your inspiration?
What are my beliefs? I fundamentally believe that every single person is an expression of the divine, that this is all God manifesting itself, that at some point total awareness wanted to make itself aware to itself, and in doing so it forgot itself, and now we are that awareness. In the forgetting, we forget, what is it that we are? I'm a person, right? Because I have a body. But no, we're not this. This is temporary. This dies. And like we know, energy is never destroyed. It's only what is it? It's never energy cannot be destroyed. It can only be shifted into something new. Whatever.
There's only a set amount of matter, and it just gets recycled.
And as such, it's just like I believe that fundamentally we all belong to a greater awareness. And through my own practices, 8 years of daily meditation, I have missed some days. 8 years of meditating as much as I can. You start recognizing, and I can only speak from my experience, you start recognizing that, oh shit, I really am not my emotion. Because suddenly you're able to sit with something that is aware of these things arising. And then after practice, you can bring that awareness into your everyday life. And then suddenly your everyday life, you're literally living in an elevated state. It's not this sexy, dramatic visual thing where suddenly the colors are all different and vivid. But it's suddenly that I'm free from the old narratives, the old powers, the old influences that used to rule my life. And you wake up to realizing, oh shit, I was living unconsciously before it. For better or worse of that word, that's kind of what it felt like. So my spirituality is about self-realization, becoming conscious of what I really am. Because I will argue to the depths of time, and I don't actually think I need to argue it because I think it's the truth, that we are God. Or that self, you are the totality of the universe in a moment. You're being expressed in that moment. But there is no true difference between our essence. We are spirit. We are the same. And there are disciplined practices that can help you realize that. But it's not sexy. I tell people it's not sexy. It's literally every day putting in work, reading texts, trying to learn about your mind, doing trauma work so that you can free yourself of the unconscious pulls of your past, doing relationship work to pull yourself from those unconscious pulls of your past. And after you do work and discipline and fix your diet and health, because eating shitty foods and stuff fucks up your gut mind connection, which disrupts your ability to be present and aware. And the more that you become disciplined and healthy and practice, I can only tell you from where I am, you start realizing that who you thought you were wasn't what you thought you were. And that there is a deeper core to yourself and there is a spiritual element. And I mean, whether you see it or not, I'm not here to prove it. I feel it.
There is something to that though, because I feel like so many people are just caught in like a loop. They're living in their, like you said, unconscious, subconscious. It's like their lower self, and they haven't
Actualized.
they haven't realized or gotten to that place where they're like, although there's more to this, there's like different levels to this. And like what one of my coaches, Jason Brown, always says is like, you reach like the pinnacle of like living your highest self as your lowest self.
Yes.
And then you get there, like whether it's the money, the car, whatever it is that you like thought you wanted to attain, then you get it and you're like, I'm still miserable, because there's more to life. There is that spiritual aspect, and there's so much more to it. And like so many people are just floating around in that lower self because they haven't realized that there's more to this. And like you said, like God's within all of us. And again, pretty much all religions
Say the same thing.
God creates us in his image.
Mm-hmm.
But then when you say that, like, oh, like I must have some of that
Divine.
in me,
Yeah, it must be somewhat divine.
people are like, well, no, that's impossible, because you were
told your whole life you were nothing but
Well,
you're
yeah.
just a
Especially Abrahamic religions, it's like you can't say that you're God. Like you
Yes.
have to have like God is up here and then I'm down here and I worship God.
But that's
like a hierarchy.
that's what Christianity did by saying Jesus is the literal Son of God and neglect his actual words, which is what he said: the kingdom of heaven is within you as it is within me. He called everyone children of God, but then somehow the Bible frames it as, no, he was the Son of God. You're all dirty and sinful. You guys could never be like him. No, Jesus was trying to tell you, you could all be like me. All of you can become enlightened. Everyone can be self-realized. We can all do it. Whether or not it's going to happen in this lifetime, who
But
knows?
they talk about heaven on earth all the time,
All
too.
the time.
And it's just like, so what is that then? Because like the more work I do, and like you were saying, through meditation, breath work, all these different eating healthy and just like treating my body like a temple, stop drinking, like all these things, I'm very conscious of what I do and how I facilitate my days and what I make time for. It's just like you start observing things from a different perspective, a different lens. And like just the other day, I was at a baseball game with some friends and I'm just observing all these people. And like, you know, when they put the thing on the board, like everyone claps. Or when they put them on the Jumbotron, they get so excited. Oh my God, I was on the screen for a second. And they're like, they put a player on the screen. Everyone starts cheering. It's like, it's like, it felt like being in, like, I imagine this would like being in the Coliseum was like.
Yeah.
It's just a massive, like, everyone come. You're going to get
entertained.
food, drink, be entertained, and just forget about everything else.
They know it's entertained.
Yeah.
And it's like you're idolizing the sport, these figures, you know all their stats, you know all these things. It's just like, this is so weird.
What's that quote? Don't worship false idols.
Right.
It's almost like we live in a culture where all we do is worship false idols instead of worshiping the true idol, the God within you, aka God. No,
Right.
Again, I don't want to be too preachy.
Celebrities, singers, you go and watch them on stage and you're just like, oh my God. Like
Yeah.
you treat these people as if they are gods among earth, right? That's how they get treated. That's how people look up to them. Their word is basically
God,
truth, right?
Bible,
Like
Bible.
if if they say something, people, all their fans will be like, yep, that's the truth. Right. And it's crazy.
But wouldn't you say those people have reached their God potential?
No,
by
I would
disciplining. Like, let's say like a singer that has reached maximum.
Sure. Or yeah,
You know
okay.
what I mean? Is able to tap into their emotions to the point that them making sounds with their mouth makes you feel something.
I think that a lot
know?
of people who are hyper successful, there's a good amount of them that are quite actualized in many respects. And as such, because they work in entertainment and media, things that are extremely valued in our given culture and time historically, yes, they're given all this attention. But I wouldn't conflate that success with self-realization, because I think there's many people who are very talented individuals who know how to do entertainment very well, and our culture celebrates that. But suddenly they're put and propped up as if they were realized wise intellects that we should all listen to because they achieved some version of success. I would argue that I know people whom have very average jobs, don't make a lot of money, and who are, man, some of the wisest, kindest, treat people with love, decency, and know how to. I go, that is way closer to actualization than the fact that somebody is in a very high achievement position in their career. I wouldn't conflate high achievement within a career towards actualization. I think if you and I are perhaps have ambition towards those things, well, then for you or I, because we want to do those things, then yeah, I guess it plays a role. It's a role or factor. But I would argue that there's many people who don't have that, who don't give a shit about being filthy rich, who don't give a shit about having some big career that's in front of people. And those people might be just as much or more actualized than someone who has more achievement success on the material world.
We just celebrate that because we're told to.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like for me, for example, like I would I would like to go see like Stavros, great example. DJ group that we both love.
Stavros.
Like I would like to go see them because to me, I'm like, man, these guys are like tapped into something that is so unique and they have the ability to make me feel great through their art.
Okay, but that's different. I mean? But that's different because they're technicians at what they do.
Yeah.
Right. And they're not like, if you mention Stavros, who knows who they are? Really? If you mention it to 10 people, I'm going to guarantee.
In a couple years.
Bro, I know, but
a couple years,
it's different.
They'll be
it's
there.
different than like.
I don't know with Stavros.
You're going to love them.
Okay, but it's like, it's different than like someone like, I don't know, man. Let's say like.
Okay, even like
Kanye,
right? You say Kanye, everyone knows who the fuck Kanye is.
But
whether you
like
Kanye,
like him
you
could argue, like, I mean, the music he's made is fucking. You have to be tuned into something.
If we're going to talk about artists, I would say absolutely. Some of the greatest artists ever do have an incredible capacity to allow divine to be expressed through their art.
Through them.
That's true. I don't think that being a channel of the divine in your art means that you're self-realized. It means you know how to channel God through art. And that's amazing. And it should be. And I think that's pretty dope. I think that's incredible.
That's what I'm saying.
But I just go, I wouldn't conflate that with self-realization. I would just
put them on a pedestal where they're better. That's the pinnacle.
No,
never. That's what's
because
wrong.
How many of them end up in rehab or with
mentally ill, like screaming the most crazy.
That's what's wrong.
Right?
I would say don't pedestalize.
Well, but they
For
get
me,
worship.
More so, it's like I just want to like. I'm like, well, like I would like to see it just to be like, I'm fascinated by the fact that a human is able to achieve.
That's an appreciation for the craft.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's coming from a different place. You're not
worshiping them.
You're not like,
it's Kanye West.
Okay, look at
like that.
Taylor Swift's fans. Like they're fucking crazy.
Yeah.
They'll do anything she says.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's different.
Yeah.
She can literally sway voting.
It's you know what I mean? That's a different kind of like, these people look up to her as if she is like a god.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's what we're like, that's what I think the point is here is like, these people get put on these like pedestals and these pinnacles and they're not.
They're just
you know
human. I mean? They're just
human beings.
Yeah.
That just figured out
their thing
or their talent and they were able to monetize it. And that's it.
Yeah.
Right. But it doesn't mean they're spiritually enlightened.
And low-key, I might even argue that there's something to be said that even someone who is spiritually enlightened, like the Buddha, like Krishna, like Jesus, even then be mindful not to worship them too much, in the sense that like you're being given a sliver of information. Jesus, we don't even know, like, was he an enlightened figure but when he was a kid, or did he become an enlightened figure at 30, whatever, after John the Baptist baptized him? What was the process by which these things happen? AKA, look, they did a lot of great things and you should learn from them. But the moment you externalize the idea that somebody else is going to have the answers for you, instead of the idea that looking within yourself and using meditation or whatever to find out your answers.
That's the point you're making.
Yes. It's like, for me, my philosophy, you need to be guided towards your inner wisdom. Not, you need to find Christ, or you need to find this person. And if you just believe this one thing, or no, I just don't.
It's very simplified. It's very simplified. And it's like, we all have intuition built within us.
Mm-hmm.
We all have that gut feeling that steers you.
That's what I'm saying.
Everyone has that. It's internalized. Call it, the Holy Spirit, your soul, whatever it is, your intuition, the following the nudges, whatever you want to call it. Everyone has that innate feeling. You all know, everyone knows what it is.
The capacity to.
Everyone knows what it is. And that always has your best intention. And every time you ignore that feeling and you do what you think is right,
betray God, bro.
You end up taking the hard way and coming back full circle to where you started and be like, you want to try this way now? And it's like this, it's again, this like divine connection to God. And it's like, he's like, look, trust that feeling. I put it there for a reason.
I made you in my image.
Right. We're designed in this way for a reason. You know what I mean? It's just like animals do things instinctually without knowing. Like, I just watched a video on Instagram of these people who, there was an orphan beaver. So they brought it into their home, raised it, and it started building a dam in the hallway with random items from around the house. And it's never seen a dam be built because it wasn't in that environment.
Yeah.
It took a tree, their Christmas tree. It took blankets and it built a dam across the hallway because it's like,
And there's
this
not
is
even a river.
no, there's not
no
even water. It's just like,
fuck it.
I need to do this. It's just, it's programmed.
Nature, bro.
You're
Underrated.
made like, it's just like you're designed to do things.
You know what? It's funny. I call that what you just talked about. I said, I was with some friends, so I was a little high on acid, but I was like, it's that you are an expression of nature, right? Let's cut the spiritual stuff for a second. Let's come back. Well, you are literally a process of nature, right? You're created through this evolutionary process. And what was new or unique about humans is like our neocortex and being able to think so much, which is great. But it's like you're now thinking your way away from these instinctual drives. And in a weird way, we're being called to use the power of the neocortex and all this stuff that we've developed within our brain while being guided by the evolutionary powers within you, by your true instincts, the ones that are deep down, not the primal fight or flight ones, but like the ones that will allow nature to flow through you. Because I really believe we're very, I mean, on topic for your podcast, we are very removed from our nature, both in an environmental sense, but just in like what are we supposed to be doing here? Because I think when you really sit down with people and you ask humans, what do you guys enjoy? It's like, well, we like moving, we like sex, we like food, we like maybe dance. It's like humans we're just monkeys, right? We're like these primate beings. We're just monkeys. But we're so removed from our natural instinct. We're so alienated from that aspect of selves that it becomes suddenly when we have a conversation around living intuitively, it feels like so foreign to people. They're like, what? Like you're just being guided by this thing. It's like, no, you are a process of nature, like any animal. Like a beaver that builds dams, you have something within you that's calling you to live a certain way. And I can almost guarantee for most people, it's like to become divinely guided by yourself.
Well, and I've listened to so many podcasts with like hyper successful people who have had it all, the money, the success, the businesses, anything they want. They're miserable. They end up in a hard place, whatever, business fails, whatever, they lose all their money. But during that time, they were stingy. They didn't give to anybody. They didn't help anybody. It was just like me. And then when they do it again, it's like, I'm going to just try and help people. And then everything changes. They make that money back 10 times faster. They're able to help so many more people. And when they become of service, everything changes. That's just what we're here to do.
The paradoxical law, when you focus on serving yourself, seems like you're living in scarcity. When you start focusing on serving others, suddenly you're in abundance. It's literally just the way it is. And these guys, I love the business example because often they're not that spiritual, but they understand. When I started to focus on how I could make value for others, suddenly the value was given back to me tenfold.
Yeah.
Right. That's it.
What do you know about Jesus? I feel like you know.
I love Jesus.
I feel like you know a lot about Jesus. Have you read about him? You know a lot about history about Jesus?
I feel like I know some things.
Yeah. What do you know about this guy? Like, what is your theory on who he was? How he became the most famous person ever in history?
I can tell you.
I think so, right?
Yeah.
Is anyone more famous than Jesus?
I mean,
I think Jesus is the
Bieber.
most. Jesus, guys, don't be putting that. Jesus Christ, I'm sorry. I think, okay, this is kind of in line with what an author and friend of mine, Bob Peck, shared in his book, Original Sin is a Lie. Really brilliant book. I would recommend it to people who are interested in Christianity and the kind of universal thread that actually ties most monotheistic religions together beyond the dogma of that was created by men. And that is that every single one of these religions has an individual who has awoken to a level of consciousness. In this level of consciousness, they no longer see themselves as a separate unit from God. They see themselves as it's like I'm the son of God. It's like they now live in an embodied place where they are one with this universal power, call it what you may, the universe, God. And I think that these individuals have walked the earth. I'm not so much of the belief that they were like sent from heaven and they're no, I think they were humans who at some point, for whatever unique, whether that's they're a soul that's been reincarnated so many times, they're finally at that stage of getting enlightened, or if that's what you believe in, or perhaps it's just that enough psychic conditions and the necessary environments and stimuli triggered that enlightenment. But I believe that's what they are. They're simply enlightened figures, humans who walked the earth. And yes, they were real. And I do believe that when human consciousness reaches that kind of level, the powers that an individual possesses starts to bend your material understanding of reality. When a consciousness recognizes itself for what it is, which is that which is beyond the material, it can begin to will into existence in the material realm things like the ability to walk on water, like the ability to create food from something. I believe that. I fundamentally believe that when, and I can't prove it, I'm not here to defend it. It's just, I'm of the belief that at a certain point, and if you can become so enlightened, which is extremely rare, and I'm not saying like if you're here to meditate,
right?
Yeah,
right.
You know what I mean?
But you do see monks who are able to like channel energy through their hands and light
Wim
newspaper
Hof
on
even.
fire. Like, you know what I
even-
mean? Like, it's like, well, that's crazy. How are you doing that?
Yeah.
You know
Or
what I mean?
even Wim Hof, you could go, the guy who's just shown there's actually a way to breathe that literally changes the way your endocrine system normally works so that you can do something which was literally said to be scientifically impossible.
Right.
That's my point is, I think there are enlightened figures who figured some stuff out, and in that realization of self, were able to tap into something beyond the material universe that gave them what appeared to be godlike powers. But again, I think getting focused on the powers is silly and really detrimental to what the point is. And the point is, you can find inner peace, harmony within yourself, and peace between us.
Yeah.
The more that we work towards living through these kind of ideals, and that's kind of how I see Jesus Christ, is a man who became self-realized, tried his best to live up to the ideals that he had within him in the constraints of his time as a Jew who was talking to the Jews among them, and he was trying to call out the hypocrisy of Judaism at the time. So I don't know how much you guys know about the Bible, but like Jesus was really big on criticizing the religious leaders of the time, which is again partly why he was killed, and the Jewish leaders of the time were happy to have him killed, because he was saying, how are you guys preaching this amazing Bible and these words, from your religion, but here you guys are like allowing the poor to suffer, like you guys aren't actually practicing what you preach. He was just simply like one of those many people who said, I'm going to practice what you guys claim to preach. And he was passionate about it. There's this whole scene where he enters a market and he flips over tables and he's going, how dare you guys? You guys are using this financial system and you're screwing people over and you're being greedy and selfish. He was passionate, and, people paint Jesus out to be like totally Zen. No. I think he was a human being who was passionate and very enlightened. That's what I see.
Interesting take. Interesting. That's a hot take, right?
But
there.
I know it would.
Well,
This will piss
what do you
off
think
Christians.
about-
Though.
You have any Jesus opinions?
I wear him every day. Like, and I do think he's incredible. And
Yeah,
I
I
literally
got him
every
on my chain too. Same.
I do. But
Same,
by the
yeah.
way, I hope to any Christian listening, in my meditation every morning, I spend like 5 minutes doing a devotional prayer to Krishna, Jesus Christ always first, Krishna, Mahavatar Babaji, Lahir Messiah, Swami Sri Yukteswar, Paramahansa Yogananda, Ryan Kurzak, and Chris Artain. Like, I'm very, it's not that I don't revere and have some reverence. I do. I'm just trying to pull the conversation beyond, only Jesus could live, like only these people can be good. No, why can't we?
Because if you talk to Christians now, and like if you were to like put it into context to them and be like, would you give everything up for Jesus right now? Like
They would.
They wouldn't give up their possessions. They wouldn't give up their house. They actually wouldn't live the life that's called of them in the Bible. They wouldn't do the things that is asked of them. And I think, again, it's like a lot of it is parables, and it's meant to teach you something.
It's wisdom.
And it's people often take everything very literally in the Bible, and you have that extreme side of things where it's like, but you can't live that life either, because there's a guy who tried it on YouTube. And he tried to live like the Old Testament rules.
Wait, really?
For like a year.
Oh, that's
Bro, it was impossible.
In the modern world?
Yeah, in the modern world. Yeah, it was
It'd be
literally impossible. He documented it, and he's just like, it's not possible. No human can do this.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I mean, yeah, it's just like there's certain things. It's just like one extreme versus another, right? It's just I think it's open for interpretation. And the word is going to give you what you need from it, right? Like you're going to take the lessons and apply it to your life in ways that it speaks to you. Because so many people will say, I've read the Bible 10, 20, 30 times, and every time I read it, I get something new from it. Because it's meant to be that kind of like, oh, I didn't think about that.
It's supposed to be a cultural,
like a
meme
guidance
generator, like an idea generator where, again, it
makes you question things.
And it's amazing. I love the Bible. just don't take it literally.
It's a great historical record.
Yeah.
There's no like denying that as well. It's like one of the most in-depth historical records we have.
Yeah.
But I don't know, man. Because I was raised very religious.
How do you guys? I was gonna say, what's your opinion on this kind of stuff?
I was raised Christian, so like
I was
for
raised
me,
a Catholic.
I was raised Muslim, like Orthodox. So, but Jesus is very, very revered in Islam. Like,
Yeah, most religions revere the other prophets.
He's mentioned the most in the Quran. Jesus' name is mentioned more than any other name in the Quran.
I mean, he was a figure. He was a person. Like he existed.
That's what I'm saying.
But also people now, like if you ask Christians now, most of them, I feel like, don't believe those miracles are possible today.
That's such a shame.
They're like, well, that was a special occasion, or that was this. It was like they're like that doesn't exist anymore, and they don't actually believe that can happen.
To me, the prophets were enlightened people, because you when you read about prophets, especially in Islam, every prophet comes with their teaching. So
they're enlightened.
You know, there was a prophet that came and taught people how to sew, for example, which was like a lost something that was like groundbreaking at the time. Jesus was known for his healing powers. Moses was known for his magic, or like turning his staff into a snake,
splitting the sea,
which was like in ancient Egypt, that was like the thing, like having great magicians, which is why God chose
Magi and
you know, like he comes to the courtyard and all the Pharaoh's magicians would have their snakes, and then he threw his staff down and he had the biggest snake that ate all their snakes. I think those are all like allegories.
There's lessons in that.
Yeah, there's lessons in that. I don't know so much about the magic that's happening as much as it is like this guy is just such a wise person that when he came to talk to the Pharaoh, it's just like everyone else kind of shrunk in his like next to him. Right?
There's a lot of new age thought circles that think that all of this stuff is parables around and lessons around like what you can do in these enlightenment practices. Like the snakes would probably be representative of Kundalini energy and Kundalini spirit, because it's tapping into your Kundalini that can awaken a lot of dormant powers and et cetera, et cetera. All I can go is, I do know from what I practice, which is Kriya Yoga, that there are methodological, I'm bad at pronouncing things, but you know what word I was trying to say, practices that when practiced over time can in fact give you an ability to tune into prana, life force, energy, and Kundalini, and all these things that again have been talked about for thousands of years, but in the Hindu scriptures, in the Vedic texts, by the Indians, who literally are they're the oldest religion. Like they have the most in-depth and oldest connection to their spiritual practices. And I think that there's something to be gained from them. I don't think it's nothing. I don't think they're idiots. I don't think they're fools. I think they know what they're talking about. Well, again,
with religion too, it's like everyone from every part of the world is like, I'm right, you're wrong.
So Abrahamic religions are very much like you got to be monotheistic. Otherwise, it's like.
But that's why I like Kriya Yoga. Kriya Yoga isn't about a belief. It's around, they call them scientific methods and practices that you can do, and you can be any religion you want. But it's like they just very adamantly do believe if you do these things, these practices will help you become self-realized.
Well, most like hardcore Christians will say breath work is the devil. Like you're channeling spirits, or you're doing something. It's not of God, because it wasn't talked about in the Bible, or it wasn't this. So like there's that extreme of things where if it's not mentioned in the Bible, or it's mentioned in a negative way, or whatever
how
it
funny
is
that though?
You don't even entertain it. Yeah. Astrology, devil. Like it's a different thing. You shouldn't.
Pagan.
It's pagan. It's just, but it's but literally
heretics. For Muslims, like everyone is a heretic, right? If they're not of the people of the book, which would be Jews, Christian, and Muslim, it's a heretic.
Really?
Yeah.
So it's like very extremist.
I'm a heretic.
Yeah. It's very extremist. It's like, this is the only way. And it's funny because like, if, as being raised Christian, whatever, if my family was born in India, we would be Hindus. And then we'd be looking at everyone else like, you're an idiot. You're wrong. We're right. This is what it is.
You're going to hell.
Yeah. Like it's just like, if you just put yourself in that, I was born in a different part of the world, I would believe I'm right. And everyone has that like belief. And it's just like, are you?
In my personal opinion, I think everyone should be encouraged to believe what they want to believe. That's most aligned with them. However, in this kind of nuanced perspective, eventually, I believe the highest wisdom is stop believing. Why do you need to believe something? you need to believe something because you have doubt around it, right? It's like, oh, I need to believe I'm great because I just don't know that I'm great. All right. And at some point, I think you have to live through a place of knowing. And in that place of knowing, you're not spending time in your head philosophically questioning the nature of reality. You're just present in reality. You're just,
so you say feel into it.
it's just like,
Just know. It's a knowing.
you wake up, you do your meditation because you already know that it's going to help you because you always have done it and it makes you feel more present and embodied. You do your little breath work, not because you believe that connects your spirit. No, because you know that when you do that, you have a greater capacity to show up in your relationships in a loving manner and effectively, whatever. You operate no longer from the world of, I believe this because I believe this and I only do this because of my belief. No, I just know. I now operate from knowing. I'm shifting into that place of, I'm honest, like, where I'm kind of like, and I had this kind of debate with someone like, oh, what do you mean you know what you know? Isn't that arrogant? I was like, I'm not saying that you can't have your own knowing. I just don't really need to debate what I know. Like, I know that when I meditate, it helps me. I know.
It's enough to know.
It's enough to know.
Just
enough
like
to
working out.
Exactly.
You know
And
what
it's like, I don't have to believe that working out is going to make me stronger and healthy. I know it
It's
will.
a knowing. Yeah. Like, you see the results from putting in the effort. And it's
Yeah.
just like, yeah, I think there's something to that. It's just like feeling into it and knowing. Like, you don't have to waste the energy trying to explain it or convince somebody of it. Because again,
Or convince yourself.
Right.
That's what I think it is.
That's really where the burnout comes from, is when you're trying to convince yourself of something.
I'm good enough. Am I good enough?
Well, like,
Yeah.
and like the second I stopped logically trying to figure things out and
Bro.
always have an answer for everything and needed to control everything else just started to flow because I relinquished that control and stopped wasting so much energy trying to figure out how everything was going to happen step by step, because it never happened the way I planned it anyways.
This is what we talked about around DMT. I don't know if you want to.
Yeah,
let's get into that.
Because okay, like when you do DMT, like look, every other psychedelic you can take it, and there's a logical part of your brain that comes out and goes, I need to explain that experience because, you know, like, oh, that was the trauma of this coming out in that thing, or that fear I felt in that moment was a reflection of my anxiety. There's a depth and a level to which you can actually do that with mushrooms and acid and all the other psychedelics. When you take DMT, which is dimethyltryptamine, the active component in ayahuasca, it is not something you can ever logically, you cannot come from that experience at the dosage anyways that I think we've done and be like, oh, I got it. I understand that. I have the logical capacity to, you don't. The brain, the human mind cannot logically conceive that which is unreasonable because we have the rational mind. And I believe that when you use DMT, your spirit, soul, deeper sense of awareness gets access to a depth of reality that exists beyond the rational universe or material world that we exist within. And once you experience that, you know for certain, wasting my time trying to logically explain everything before I instead of just kind of leaning into trusting and feeling and intuition is fucking silly, because I know that there is a depth to this universe that I would never be able to logically explain.
Yeah.
And it kind of was a gift where I kind of came from that experience. Obviously I was a little bit rattled, but after a while I said, I'm not here anymore to figure this thing out. I thought I was here to figure it out. I really thought
figuring it out.
I'm here to figure it out. I got to figure this thing out. Now it's like,
There's no figuring
there's
it
no
out.
figuring it out.
There's no figuring it
No.
out.
So now do you think, because I've been researching cymatics and a lot of stuff around sound,
Yes.
and every sound frequency has a geometric shape
Yes.
associated, and also, so from what I know from people who have taken DMT and all the things I've read about it, it's always a geometric experience. Now, do you think you're tapping into the underlying fabric of this reality, and that is what's happening?
Yeah, bro.
Well, we can't see, we can't perceive it.
Uh-huh.
But when you go there, it's like, oh, okay. This is what's really going on.
I just touched God.
Yeah.
Oh, what was God? The ineffable. Because God's not a person or being like the way we think of it. It's, and what is the thing that from which creation arises? Like the religions, or like they said, Om, amen. The sound, the word of God. there is a sound that resonates through the universe that from which the wellspring of our universe arose. And I think of it as Om, Om. And yes, it's sound. And when you take DMT, your consciousness bleeds into it for a brief moment. That's what it is. For a brief moment, your consciousness bleeds into Om, but it's infinity. You touch infinity.
So you think vibration.
Everything.
So you think it's removing like
the
this,
yes,
what we see, our matrix.
Yep.
It's unraveling that and giving you a look behind the layers. Like the underlying fabric of what actually makes
it's dropping the
everything happen.
That's exactly it.
You drop the meat suit and you fall into infinity. And it's so overwhelming.
Interesting.
It's so overwhelming.
Because I never understood the geometrics, like why. And then the more I learn about cymatics and frequencies and how everything has a geometric pattern to it and like all these things, I'm like,
Yep.
Yeah. It's like, it literally feels like you fell backwards into the infinite.
You fell into the infinite. You come back and you have to accept humbly, my rational mind, for all its intellectual capacity, will never truly intellectually reason it. I might be able to intellectually pull a couple lessons or something, like some wisdom from it. Like, hey, don't spend your whole life trying to figure everything out rationally and maybe lean into play.
Well, because they do talk about that in the Bible too. Like, don't waste time.
The Tower of Babel, that's the story.
Well, that and like you're never going to know everything. Stop trying.
Yeah.
Just stop trying. Because you're just never you don't have enough time.
Yeah.
In a lifetime. Just stop trying.
You can't.
Right. And the Tower of Babel.
What's the Tower?
Tower of Babel is a Christian story where there was a very enlightened culture that was on Earth that once existed. This is like it's a parable. It's not literal. And
that's something some people believe is literal, which again is very
the libraries of Babylon. No.
Well, the Tower of Babel.
Tower of Babel is this idea. Okay, so these people build a tower because they're trying to reach God.
Okay, yeah, I know this.
And they're very smart and they're very clever people. And then God is like, the hell you doing trying to reach me? Spites them. All of a sudden now they all speak different languages and they can no longer communicate.
Because they were going to do it.
Yeah.
He's like, they're actually going to figure it out. But that poses the question, well, where's heaven then?
Yeah.
If they're able to build a man-made structure to touch heaven, where's heaven?
Yeah.
I think the metaphor, like the allegory.
Right. What's the allegory? Yeah.
It's like the moment you try to know God and contain God in a way, you become confused. Like you can't truly, that's why religion's created, right? It's like religion taps into this truth, this universal thing, right? Now I need to make it something. Okay, well now you've divided the people because it's like, it's always going to, you create different languages. And I think it just speaks to the fact that each human psyche is a little bit unique and different and varied. As such, the limited human expression in its attempt to logically understand the concept of God will always be contained within its own subjective ability to understand anything. As such, you'll create divisions now between us. That's why it's like, I think to know God is, again, like, we shouldn't talk about it too much. Like we shouldn't spend too much time like debating around it because that's how you create the division then. It's like to know God is to know each other, to really sit with one another in presence. But that goes beyond language. It's like to truly sit with God and be in that presence and exist within that awareness is when we don't try to, which one of us is right here? And then suddenly we become divided. And then you become divided because suddenly you're speaking different languages. But why are you speaking different languages? Well, because each one of you has a unique subjective interpretation of reality as long as you are contained within this body.
Yeah. And it's also a convenient way to be like, this is why all the languages exist.
Yeah. That was a silly story.
Yeah, you know what I mean? So, and it's just like, when you really like look at it and it's like, well, does that make sense? You know what I mean? Like, does it make actual sense? And that's the thing. Cause you have people who are like, it's the word.
So the word is the word. Like
that's it.
What's on the paper is what is the truth.
You don't question it.
Yeah.
That's such a silly misunderstanding.
But again, I need to research more.
Man-made is that? You know,
well, I need to research more.
Question it is such a
man-made thing.
Where's like, what is the most like? Are the Dead Sea Scrolls?
I think the Dead Sea Scrolls are some of the most ancient texts that we have access to.
Right. So
the rest is oral tradition.
Right. So like, how much gets conflated over time and changed and this.
Well,
and
I'm sure the
that.
Bible as it is today is not the Bible as it was.
Oh my God, not
back
at
then,
all.
not even
But that's
close.
the
It's not even
question,
same language.
right?
It's
But
been
that's what
translated into
everyone-
100
The
times.
Gospel of Thomas has been taken out. There's a bunch of stuff that like
There's a lot of things, and you're like, well, like is which is
So
it?
it's such an interesting, like it's so interesting how a religion like Christianity, or like Judaism, Christianity, and Islam come about, like because they definitely had to have resonated with people to a point where their people felt truth.
Well, I
'Cause
think
people-
it's enlightened experience, people, and then culturally relative story. That's what it is. It's
Because it
you
creates
have
empires after.
yes. It's almost like a group of men said, "Wow, that was fucking powerful. We could create a story around that thing and then profit off of it." That's what I said in that with the podcast with Alana. It's how can I take a mystical experience, create a story around that, use that to my benefit, profit, disempower the individual, and create a system in which me, the organization, the small group of people, elites, continue to have power over the masses. Right? When you think about it, isn't spirituality or these religions about freeing us? Like empowering us, but that's not how it historically has worked out. Actually, historically, it empowers a small group of people and disempowers the mass.
Yeah.
So that tells me that given the nature of how it's played out, I think every religion has a little bit of a human touch.
Yeah, a
a
little
little.
bit.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic, and it's going to get people riled up.
That's good.
for sure.
That's good. I
because
mean,
it's
I
like-
want people to think about it.
Again,
I am where I am today because I thought about it. You know what I mean? I grew up Muslim and I thought about that a lot, and I've been exposed to many other different philosophies. And I see so many parallels between what I was raised to believe and what other people were raised to believe. And it just speaks to me that there's a universal consciousness and a universal truth that is across time and language.
I think
Right.
the golden thread is love. I really do believe, like in most religions, there's this golden thread around like love.
that's the underlying principle. It's just love. Be love. And like it's funny, like I found my way back to spirituality through like cold exposure, breath work, and all these things. But it's like my own connection. I don't go to church. I don't do
How do you
I don't do
found-
the organized religion part of it, but it's my own connection. Like, like if I listen to like worship music, like from Hillsongs or whatever, like it makes me feel a certain way. Like I feel something that I didn't feel before. Because before we just go to
Forced.
church. This is what we do every Sunday, this. And it was just like, it's something I had to do. It
Here's a
wasn't
ritual.
a choice. But, now that I found my way back to it and I have this like knowing that like everything's always worked out in my life. I'm always been taken care of. I've always been looked after. And to me, that's like, okay, cool. Thanks God. Like, I appreciate you
You are supported.
for always. Exactly. And I feel that. And
You're
it's just
supported.
like, oh, like, and I felt that when I did mushrooms with you and Chris at the cabin. It was
You're
just
supported.
like,
You're loved.
it was the first time I actually felt like happy and like, oh, like this is what it's supposed to feel like. This is it. Like, shit. This is it. It's so simple. It's so basic, but people like to make it so complicated and so construed. It's just I don't know, man.
I think Duncan Trussell said it very well in his podcast in the Midnight Gospel, but it's like you are loved, you are supported, like the universe loves you. It does, because you are the universe. Like I said that thing. I think that there was this grand awareness that we once were, and it wanted to know itself in a weird way. It's like God wanted to play with themselves. So they had to lose themselves in this creation. And now we're God finding ourselves again. And we realized we didn't hate ourselves. We loved ourselves. We love ourselves. We are. I mean, and this ties into like the very common mainstream ideas of like, you are what you attract what you are. You put up. It's like, yes.
Well,
and
yeah.
I think when you resonate in love, you truly remember what you are. You're like, oh my God, that's what I really am. I love. That's like my nature. My nature is to live in the state of love. And that, again, love doesn't mean you don't have discernment, that you don't have values. That's not what I'm saying. But love, I really believe it all comes back to that.
Right. It's interesting. So I have a question because the podcast is nature is underrated.
Yes.
So how has nature played a role in your development and getting you to where you are now?
In my personal development, I would say that nature, I grew up in British Columbia, which is probably one of the most beautiful places on earth. Moved there when I was 3.
Facts. Yeah.
And I grew up in a family where we were always hiking, always outdoors, mountain biking, snowboarding, skateboarding. I was always outside and about. climbing trees, running in forests. My mom used to we would force my mom to take us to the forest near our, like outside of our home when I was like a preteen or a kid. And just me and my little brother and my older brother, we would just make up games and play in our imagination. I think as such, nature for me was like the playground that I was always allowed to be in. I was always allowed to go and explore nature and feel connected to this playful side of myself. I call myself Nino because I feel extremely playful in my life. I don't, I have my own podcast called Where's the Nuance? Because I'm like, hey, come on, what's with this either or? What's with this adult seriousness of having to feel contained? Nature and me being able to exist within an environment where I didn't feel more contained. I felt supported to express myself infinitely in however imaginative and like colorful ways. I mean, and now I think more just pragmatically, I never lost the value of what nature was. Like, I think a lot of people, if you don't grow up around it, you kind of think that nature is this thing that exists outside of yourself and that like humans are not like animals. I very intuitively from a young age was like, oh, this is what I am. I am monkey. I am monkey who likes to play on trees. I like to play. I like to move around because I was always in an environment that facilitated like very, I guess, primal or natural movement and a lifestyle within me. So I look at people who maybe perhaps feel very alienated from themselves. And I think it's larger than that. It's that humans, as much as I like to talk about self-realization and going inwards, humans are social beings that evolved within the outdoors and natures and these little tight social groups and tribes. And I think the more time that I spent outside, the more connected I felt to myself. And it gave me like a kind of confidence, honestly. I think I was 17 and I'd take my dog for like a hike and I'd fucking sprint up a mountain and I would feel a kind of power, not unlike when you're like in the gym, but it was almost better because it felt real. Like when you're in the gym, it's awesome. And I work out like all the time. I love it. But doing exercise outdoors feels like you're connecting with the primal sense of who you really are. Like, oh yeah, this is what my ancestors did. This is what we used to do.
There's something to it. You're tapping into something, right? And it's like, I feel like
when the sun is beating down on you,
like,
when
this
the wind,
this is my life. This is who I am. This is who I am.
Yeah.
Right.
It feels
now we make it a commodity.
It's so fucked.
We live in cities, we live in condos, we live in building, all these things. And it's like, oh, I go camping like once or twice a year. And that's like my little getaway, right? Yeah. That's my interaction with nature.
If they do that.
Yeah. And like even that, like it's treated as a commodity. It's not like something that's just inherent or natural. And like the Japanese have done so much research on forest bathing. That's what like they basically created that. And there's so many studies around that and like the impact that just spending time in a forest has on you. They've done studies with soldiers who were recovering. The ones half that spent time outside recovered almost twice as fast as the ones who were kept inside the hospital exclusively. Like there's something to it, grounding, being in connection with that.
You say that, and I think I actually had a not great time when I first moved to Toronto. To be honest, I kind of relapsed and I started drinking because I was very alienated here. And I guess I kind of lost the support systems I had. I went back to Vancouver to take care of my dogs for a month. And also I think kind of I needed it just to like sober up a little bit. And it is healing. It's something about like, and I was hiking every single day with my dogs and they're very healthy and needy dogs. There's like 3-4 hour hikes a day. There's something in that space where you can really heal yourself. Like there's this brevity. It feels like it's like a super meditation. If I meditate every day an hour, which is like, that's my normal thing at home, it's great. It feels great. But hiking for 3-4 hours and just focusing and being present in the moment, allowing your brain to intake the stimuli and trying to stay kind of grounded in the moment, not getting lost too much in thought, that does wonders. It's like a supercharged meditation. And it really helped me like deal with my shit. Yeah. So I really recommend it to people. I think it's therapy. It's like the best form of therapy.
It is.
It like for me, yeah. I mean, for me, I never understood why, but like when I got into photography, I was always the most at peace when I was out in nature with my camera, just like capturing
the
details.
Most simple things.
The most like taking pictures of leaves during the fall, but just like finding little vignettes where it was just like a work of art, and you're just appreciating the colors and the textures and the shapes and the sound just being like the leaves crinkling under your feet, like rustling in the wind, like little critters running around. So just like being in that. Like there was a time where I drove up somewhere in Michigan and I was there for 4 hours and I thought it had been like 30 minutes because I was just walking around and just taking photos, and I was getting texts from my brother like, yo, where are you at? Did you die? Because I went over to pick up a package and then I was like, oh, there's this forest nearby. I'm just going to go there. And then I just got lost. I just got lost in the woods. And I was like, it's just one of those things where it's just like when you immerse yourself in it and you allow yourself to be present and just take it in, it's just, there's something about it, man.
I would argue perhaps it is the capacity to feel gratitude for nature that is an entryway into a deeper knowing of yourself. Because I think I actually grew quite, there was a moment where I was like, when I was like a teenager, like 13 to 15, I was starting to get like, oh, we're going to go hiking. I was starting to feel disconnected from it. And I actually did mushrooms at 15 for the first time.
Very good.
Yeah, I've been using psychedelics for 11 years. Yeah, that's why I'm so cuckoo. But the big takeaway from that experience, I remember I was at Stanley Park and I had what I would call a conversation with Mother Nature. Okay, I was on this little wooden bridge and it was windy and this wind picked up this dust and it kind of like threw it up. And in my experience, in that moment, I had a conversation with Mother Nature and she told me that I hadn't been respecting her and I hadn't been paying attention to her in the way that like I should have. And it was that day where I, like you said, I like was looking at a leaf and I'm like, wow, this truly is wonderful. And once I left that psychedelic experience, it reawoke what I had when I was a kid, which was a reverence for nature. And what you have is so special because a lot of people can't do that. A lot of people walk in a forest and go, this is so stupid. Like, what the heck? There's nothing here. There's nothing there's no pleasure. There's no hedonistic thing that can feed my ego. When I'm like, whoa, dude, like you instinctively or naturally, hopefully should be able to just sit in a forest and be in awe. Because that's what we were evolved to be able to do.
It just feels natural.
Dude,
it feels natural.
Everything about it feels right because that's just where we came from. The sounds feel right. The air feels right. The light feels right. Everything just feels like you're exactly where you're supposed to be.
You don't need a phone. Yeah. You don't need like the distraction. You have everything you need in that moment. And like when you are lost in the woods and you're doing that, like none of your possessions matter.
No,
nothing material actually matters because you're just like, oh, I'm fulfilled. I have everything I need in this moment right now. Just being in this environment. It's interesting.
Different level, bro.
And perhaps then you could argue that experience right there, if more people had that more often, then they would understand why a lot of our shared criticisms around the modern world make sense, because suddenly, hey, yeah, I do. Why do we have such an obsession with material things? Why do we value these of like huge events of entertainment that are so, I don't know,
like
bombacious, overproduced? Yeah, it's like, why do we treat nature as if it's like this silly, pedantic thing to care about?
Right. Like if you touch a tree, people look at you like you're crazy.
You're a hippie.
It's like, oh, you're a hippie. Why don't you have
One of the most profound moments in my life was sitting across from a tree and taking in that it was breathing.
That's sick.
I was on mushrooms, but I would like really took in that, oh wait, this tree's full on breathing.
It is.
Dude, it's full on breathing. And it like
breathing your CO2.
Yeah, it's taking my CO2, giving me back oxygen, and it's creating food for itself.
Crazy.
And holding the earth under me. Right. It's making sure that the earth under me does not get shifted.
And it's connected to the other trees and talking and connecting. And like the more you learn about, like if you look into like mushrooms,
mycelium, oh my God.
It's a network of basically neurons.
Super conscious. They're super conscious plant life.
There's plants that turn bitter when like if a bird will come and start eating the plants at one end of the forest, it'll communicate to the plants on the other side of the forest and they'll turn bitter.
It's true.
It's a real thing.
No, of course. Yeah.
It's a real thing. They'll they'll turn into a bitter profile so that when the bird comes and eats it, they won't like it. They'll go somewhere else.
Is like, it's wild.
Literally.
It's wild. Like
it's underrated is what it is.
I think for nature is underrated.
Yeah. I think if we could sum it up in one word.
Fantastic Fungi, I think, has to be, for anyone who's listening or watching, one of the best documentaries you should watch. Like you really nice. I don't say should often, but you should fucking watch that. It literally just demonstrates how arrogant humans are when we presume that our anthropomorphic lens of the world is like even justifiable. It's not. And the more that we remove ourselves from the totality of nature and the unique relationships that we are engaged with other beings, the more lost we become. That's why it's integral to come back to nature, have those experiences, learn about the networks and the way that these environments communicate within one another. Because it's those experiences, in my opinion, that even then in the spiritual life go, you know what? Maybe I don't know everything. maybe I should just kind of like stop with the whole thinking mind a little bit and just let go and be here.
Right.
Be present.
Yeah.
Be in the moment. I think we've hit our time. I think so. It feels
we're at an hour and a half.
Ooh,
Yeah, that's
it
pretty
just
much
that
exact.
I felt like that was just like, I think we landed it perfectly right now with just that last little bit. So
Perfect.
leave it off there. Nino, it was fucking pleasure, boss.
Thanks. I hope
think
that
you'll
was
be
all
back
right.
for
Yeah,
sure.
man. Well, where can people find you?
Oh,
Plug yourself.
yeah. You can find me online at El Divine Nino, EL Divine DIVINE, Nino NINO. And I have a podcast called Where's the Nuance, where I try to bring a little bit of nuance to seemingly black and white topics. I don't mind the heat. I talk about just about anything, but that's because I truly believe that there is a broader awareness we can all come to that acknowledges that, you know what? It's not that black and white. There's a little bit of color. I do work with one-on-one with clients, with people usually who are looking for, I'd say, spiritual counseling, but it's under the umbrella of coaching. But really the goal, like I said earlier, is to guide people towards their own inner wisdom. For me to help you see that you do know best. I'm just going to help you see that. Yeah.
Awesome.
Amazing.
What's up?
Awesome. All right, guys. Thank you to everyone for tuning in. Like, share, subscribe, do all the good stuff. And we're going to catch you guys on the next one. Peace.